Dawn breaks over Hive Tertius, like industrial blood seeping through ferrocrete. At checkpoint Gamma 7, 300 workers queue beneath flickering lumens, their breath visible in recycled air that tastes of metal and systematic fear. Steam vents from ruptured bricks while Auspex scanners click like mechanical insects, counting heartbeats and cataloguing hesitation. The litany of 3 questions begins, a civic psalm for an economy at war. First question: do you serve the Emperor's will? We serve the Emperor's will. Second question: do you speak only truth? We speak only truth. Third question: do you harbor thoughts against the throne? On the 47th repetition, a child falters. His mother ghosts the replies with her lips, but the boy misplaces the oath. Silence skids down the line. Auspex wands rise and click with insistent rhythm. A rifle sight tracks through the crowd, steady, patient, practiced, until eyes drop of their own accord. The checkpoint cadre wear the colours of the 47th Scalaran Interdiction Regiment. Their pauldron badge displays an eyeless mask over crossed quills, the promise that seeing and saying have been severed, and that writing will judge the living. A clerk soldier takes the mother's ledger, measures the weight of her words against the weight of her rations, and frowns in ritual precision. This is how the Imperium wages war in the 41st millennium. In the Emperor's war economy, information is ammunition, and this regiment fires it point blank. Doctrine reduces contact to interrogation. Charity becomes covert logistics. A greeting transforms into codebook until proven otherwise. The Catechism insists, the enemy is anyone who knows something you do not control. It is tidy and it is hungry. 2 sigils govern the scene, though no one speaks them aloud. The first hangs in a lockbox. Edict 72. Blackwire, a sealed directive whose authority cuts through planetary statute like a mono knife through wax. The second is older and bloodier. The Heracleon Precedent, a story retold in mess lines with the reverence reserved for disasters that made careers. Together they license a simple inversion. Trust is the anomaly, suspicion the baseline metric. The line crawls forward. The boy, coached to monotone, reaches the oath without choking. The Auspex is settled. When the mother approaches the distribution window, the clerk soldier pauses at her ration chit. It bears the standard Imperial Aquila, but stamped across it in black ink is a wire sigil, coiled like a serpent around the eagle's wings. For audit, he explains, confiscating the chit. The pouch swallows it with a thud, too final for paper. Emergency becomes policy when it is easier than admitting error. Policy becomes ritual when no one remembers the emergency. Behind the screen, a scribe drops the chit into a red tin marked Blackwire, its lid bound by clay seal. On the wall, the day's quota board lists 3 questions, 512, exceptions, 0. The boy looks at his empty hands and learns what silence buys today. The regiment is less an army than a filing system with rifles. Authority descends through braided hierarchies designed to distribute moral weight until no individual bears complete responsibility for what follows. At the apex sits Colonel Thane, whose morning briefings begin with casualty projections rather than tactical assessments. Commissar Volk maintains ideological purity through pharmaceutical assistance and summary justice. Departamento Monitorum Liaison, Prefect Hadris, converts operational requirements into resource allocation. His ledgers categorizing civilians as productive assets or resource drains with actuarial precision. Most significant are the Ordo Hereticus advisors, whose names never appear in official records. They attend planning sessions as Consultant Tertius or Observer Prime, their authority derived from sealed writs that supersede regimental command. Their recommendations carry inquisitorial weight without paper trails of direct involvement. Beneath this command lattice, civilian enforcers operate under emergency writs that subordinate planetary law to military necessity. Local magistrates process cases through modified tribunals, Where burden of proof inverts, innocence requires documentation. Guilt assumes itself from circumstance. The operational framework centers on the Civilian Threat Assessment Matrix, a 5-tier classification system reducing human complexity to administrative categories. White, essential, supervised. Gray, useful, monitored. Amber, irregular, restricted. Red, suspect, immobilized. Black, hostile, disposable. Movement between tiers flows one way without explicit dispensation from black wire officers. Surveillance quotas fix the tempo. Each squad must log 6 suspicion events per watch. Under quota invites ration penalties. Over quota earns commendations few dare redeem. Witness ledgers, thick, oil-stained, brass-edged. Record statements as juridical truth. Every entry bears seals, scribe, squad, commissar, and when invoked, the black clay impression of Edict 72. The Red Line Protocol draws invisible killing grounds through ordinary space. Hab corridors stenciled with fading stripes, market approaches bounded by waist-high chains. Inside these zones, lethal force is pre-authorized, exculpation a stamp rather than hearing. Consider intelligence flow. A textile worker hums off schedule in Manufacturum K9A. Informant 23. Kappa notes unsanctioned melody to block catechist for absolution credit. The catechist consults the index of prescribed cants, finds patterns near banned Docker's signals, refuses absolution, forwards the phrase to scriptorium theta. A scribe transcribes sounds phonetically, assigns veracity to, attaches form 72. B. Civilian irregularity, minor. Squad leader Corrin receives the tasking. He studies red line maps, notes the worker's transit route, crosses sanctioned kill zones at shift's end. Arrest becomes compliance, verification to preserve quota metrics. At dusk, questions are asked in sequence. The worker answers the first 2, stumbles on the third, persistent deviation, a single last round in the sternum. The witness ledger opens. Words become evidence. Evidence becomes ash. Metrics show 1 black case resolved. Quota met. Marginal increase in street stillness. This machinery functions because it is complete. Rumor to record, record to write, write to death, all under seal. The system rewards vigilance while forbidding rest, a calculus of daily attrition that requires men who can watch neighbors die and call it duty. Such men are not born, they are manufactured. Every military doctrine has its foundational trauma. For the 47th Scalaran Interdiction Regiment, that wound was carved into history at Heraclean Port, where emergency measures crystallized into permanent paranoia through bureaucratic necessity and institutional pride. The incident began with routine precision. Munitions convoy. Theta 7 departed the orbital depot at 0347 local time, following established routes through Port District Gamma 9. The cargo manifest listed small arms ammunition and field rations destined for the Cadian Gate reinforcements. At intersection Prime 7, the roadway erupted in synchronized detonation. Shaped charges, military grade, expertly placed, vaporized 3 chimeras and 73 guardsmen in a sequence timed to catch relief columns and secondary blasts. Counterintelligence moved with the confidence of institutional assumption. Initial analysis blamed the Heraclean Stevedores Guild, whose members possessed demolition expertise and unrestricted harbour access. Mass arrests followed standard protocols. Under interrogation, guild leaders revealed the actual perpetrators. A cult cell embedded within port administration, using civilian credentials to map convoy routes and coordinate strikes. The arrested stevedores had, in fact, sheltered wounded guardsmen during the attacks, hiding them in cargo containers marked with improvised Imperial aquilers. The regiment faced an unacceptable conclusion. Their intelligence apparatus had tortured loyal citizens, while the real enemy operated through trusted bureaucratic channels. Such failure demanded either admission of incompetence or redefinition of the problem itself. Inquisitor Corda arrived at dusk, his storm barge settling into the harbour like a mechanical vulture. He examined casualty reports and requisitioned detailed population ledgers, but asked no questions about guilt or innocence. His emergency directive was elegant in its simplicity. Treat all civilians as hostile agents until proven otherwise through compliance testing. Edict 72 took form in black wire clay, pressed with his personal signet until the spiral pattern emerged like a brand. The first identification papers received their marks that evening. Implementation followed with bureaucratic thoroughness. The black wire seal appeared on ration, chits, transit permits, and work assignments. Funeral processions required advance permits specifying mourner identities and approved liturgical texts. Children's games faced scrutiny for coded communications. Hopscotch patterns resembled tactical diagrams. Counting songs might coordinate timing signals. Ancient lullabies entered the index of prescribed cants after rhythmic analysis suggested potential synchronization protocols. The doctrine achieved statistical success within acceptable parameters. Civilian arrests increased by 400% in 7 days. Security breaches dropped to 0 through elimination of unsupervised activity. Production quotas resumed normal metrics. Street patrols reported ambient compliance in all monitored sectors. Other numbers climbed with equal precision. Desertion within the regiment increased by 200% as guardsmen refused orders targeting obviously innocent populations. Commissar Volk's solution was pharmaceutical. Loyalty enhancement compounds distributed through ration supplies, combined with conditioning sessions emphasizing civilian duplicity. Those who continued questioning received transfer to forward reconnaissance duties, assignments that proved uniformly fatal. The Heracleon precedent became regimental scripture, encoded in the Vigilata Primus manual as foundational truth. Emergency measures hardened into permanent procedure because admitting their temporary nature would require acknowledging the original intelligence failure. The precedent provided both template and justification. If civilians could betray through deception, then all civilians required constant verification. But doctrine requires operators. How does one transform ordinary guardsmen into systematic oppressors? The answer lies in techniques refined through careful study of human psychology under institutional pressure. Methods with names, procedures, and measurable results. The Vigilata Primus manual occupies 73 pages of dense Gothic script, bound in black leather, stamped with the wire sigil. Its opening axiom reads like a catechism engineered by an accountant: trust is a weapon pointed inward. What follows is systematic methodology for transforming ordinary guardsmen into perpetual watchers of their own people. The Mordian method, named for the Iron Guard's disciplinary protocols, operates through controlled psychological degradation. Sleep cycles rotate on irregular intervals, 20 hours active duty, followed by 4 hours rest, then 16 hours on watch, with 6 hours recovery, preventing circadian stability and maintaining hypervigilant exhaustion. Paranoia reinforcement drills occur without warning. Sirens sound, guardsmen rush to positions, only to discover false alarms that were actually loyalty tests, measuring response speed and suspicion reflexes. Social isolation protocols complete the circuit. No extended conversation with civilians, rotating assignments to prevent emotional attachment. Written reports, required for any interaction exceeding 30 seconds. Trust classification reduces human complexity to administrative categories within the established matrix. White, essential, supervised. Grey, useful, monitored. Amber, irregular, restricted. Red, suspect, contained. Black, hostile, disposable. Conversion pathways slope exclusively downward. Grey to amber requires single incident report. Amber to red needs only circumstantial evidence. Red to black follows standard procedure. Upward movement demands written dispensation from black wire offices. Forms rarely processed. Requests often interpreted as evidence of compromised judgment. 2 operational frameworks anchor daily surveillance tempo. The rule of third doors mandates every third domicile on patrol grids remains subject to warrantless search, rotating systematically at intersections to prevent pattern mapping by civilian populations. The tri-clock system replaces planetary timekeeping with mechanical curfew signals. 3 brass chimes mounted on hab spires marking work periods, silence intervals, and darkness phases. Movement outside designated periods requires documentation. Sound during silence gets logged as rehearsal. Light during darkness constitutes proof of seditious activity. Conditioning exercises maintain operational effectiveness through manufactured stress. Mandatory threat-spotting drills use arbitrary targets. Elderly citizens walking slowly, children carrying sticks, workers humming off rhythm, requiring guardsmen to articulate suspicion as liturgy. Non-standard gait, concealed hand, off-rhythm breathing. Loyalty tests simulate civilian betrayal scenarios where actor mothers beg for children's lives, then the children appear with concealed explosives. The only passing grade is refusal of empathy. Pharmaceutical regimens complete the transformation. Stimulant tablets at dawn, maintaining alertness. Mood dampeners at dusk, preventing emotional attachment. Memory enhancers, ensuring perfect doctrinal recall while suppressing sympathy responses. Watch a recruit become an implement. Private Kale arrives from agricultural worlds where neighbors shared harvests and children played freely. Initial checkpoint duty produces visible distress. Hands trembling while searching elderly women, hesitation before confiscating family possessions, unauthorized warnings about upcoming inspections. Standard conditioning protocols apply systematically. Sleep deprivation eliminates moral reflection through exhaustion. Repeated exposure to civilian threat scenarios makes suspicion reflexive. Pharmaceutical assistance maintains operational effectiveness while suppressing humanitarian impulses. Within 6 months, Kale performs searches with clinical precision. He identifies suspicious behaviors in ordinary activities, reports conversations for linguistic analysis, recommends red classification for families showing excessive cooperation. Behavior patterns, suggesting coordinated deception. His efficiency ratings improve threefold. His stress indicators normalize. His letters home cease entirely. Statistical analysis reveals the method's effectiveness and human cost. Stress casualties among regiment personnel increase 40% above standard guard formations. Nervous breakdowns, pharmaceutical dependencies, suicide rates climbing steadily. Simultaneously, security incidents reported increase 300%, validating core doctrine through manufactured evidence. Enhanced surveillance discovers more suspicious activities because ordinary life appears threatening under constant scrutiny. The system creates its own justification. Doctrine bites until the tongue learns to enjoy blood. But civilians adapt to survive. Under total surveillance, what strategies emerge when every word risks sedition classification and every gesture might trigger lethal response? Dawn in the outer agri-terraces begins with permits, not prayer. The Vesk family, 2 adults, 3 children, 1 elderly aunt, pin stamped slips to their coats before stepping into the field lane. A catechist at the checkpoint lifts a tally wand, inventories faces, scans permits, and marks their cooperation score on a slate hanging beside a rusted aquila. Words consume rations, silence preserves them. Everyone has learned this arithmetic. Cooperation scores calibrate survival with bureaucratic precision. Above 70 earns protein paste rather than husk loaf. Above 85 qualifies for HAB units with functioning windows. Drop below 60 and clinic doors no longer open for fevers or injuries. The scoring algorithm remains classified, but patterns emerge. Excessive compliance appears suspicious. Insufficient enthusiasm suggests sedition. Optimal performance requires precise calibration between visible loyalty and believable humanity. Adaptation breeds desperate ingenuity. Temperature stones, fragments of ferrocrete placed near ventilation shafts, warm before power cuts that precede interrogation sessions. Civilians trade stone fragments like currency, timing personal activities around anticipated blackouts. Hush markets operate through gesture and positioning. Bread on windowsills signals availability. Coins in specific patterns indicate quantities. Transactions completed through choreographed movements resembling coincidental encounters. Children develop counting games that time tri-clock cycles without singing. Pebble stacking teaches numerical sequences. Finger dancing maintains rhythm memory. Shadow patterns communicate patrol schedules through approved recreational activity. The games preserve sanity while encoding survival information. The informant network corrodes community bonds through economic incentive. Brass chits bearing wire sigils promise immunity consideration for useful intelligence. Protection, honored once, never twice, though few understand this limitation until testing it. Neighbor reports, neighbor for improved cooperation. Scores. Widow Marin identifies suspicious prayer timing, earning upgraded rations while condemning Goodwife Hess to red classification. Children learn mistrust of parents whose conversations might compromise family standings. Surveillance creates its own resistance through desperate adaptation. The very paranoia designed to prevent subversion generates behaviors appearing subversive under scrutiny. Aunt Vesk teaches catechist psalms backward as counting aids for ration distributions. Reverse liturgy helps remember complex scheduling while maintaining religious appearance. When arrested for heretical recitation, her entire block stops public prayer rather than risk similar coincidences. Silence spreads like contagion. Better apostasy than accidental sedition. At evening's end, Father Vesk examines their door. Paint carries scars in repeating patterns, parallel grooves suggesting forced entry, chips indicating regular searches. The markings identify this domicile for the rule of third doors, systematic inspection every third patrol cycle, rotating to prevent civilian adaptation to search schedules. Inside, the family performs evening compliance, approved prayers, regulation bedtime, whispered conversations that sound like inventory counts. The walls transmit neighboring families maintaining similar performances. Everyone knows the scripts. Everyone plays their parts. Everyone wonders which neighbor earned brass chits by reporting yesterday's weather discussion that might have resembled coded agricultural intelligence. Tomorrow brings new performances, new scorings, new opportunities for betrayal, disguised as civic duty. Information spends like coin in the 47th Scalaran's operational theater, and coin pays back in calories, floor space, and medical doors that actually open. Productive informants receive upgraded rations, protein paste replacing husk loaf, filtered water instead of recycled condensate. Housing assignments improve to ground floor units with functioning heat exchangers, while medical priority elevates assets above standard triage protocols, where broken bones receive immediate attention and non-contributors wait through infection cycles. Interrogator Vex manages this civilian asset network from Scriptorium Theta, his pale hands cataloging human resources with actuarial precision. Each informant receives classification codes, Alpha Primary for family betrayals, earning monthly cooperation bonuses, Beta Secondary for workplace intelligence with incident-based rewards, Gamma Tertiary for street observations generating single-use credits. The ledgers track yield and reliability like agricultural harvests, trading futures of betrayal with bureaucratic efficiency. Catechists operate parallel markets selling purity testimonials, written assessments profiling compliant speech patterns, approved prayer rhythms, and acceptable social behaviors. These documents function as insurance policies during random audits, their prices fluctuating with threat levels. Standard testimonials cost 2 weeks' rations. Emergency certifications require family heirlooms or sexual favors. The catechists maintain detailed linguistic files, identifying deviations suggesting seditious thinking or cultural contamination. 2 administrative concepts anchor the system's ultimate authority. Processing facilities handle confirmed threats through standardized elimination protocols, their locations classified, but capacity requirements appearing in quarterly munitions requisitions. Transport schedule, Omega coordinates, orbital resettlement for red and black classifications. Cargo lifters departing at irregular intervals with passenger manifests listing counts but never return schedules. Quota pressure manufactures intelligence through systematic desperation. Junior troopers must identify daily suspicions to maintain operational standings. Private Holmes vomits after his first door breach, the stench of domestic fear, visceral shock, but operational leniency results in docked rations. This forces manufactured reports. Nervous twitches become coded signals. Whispered prayers transform into heretical incantations. Economic adaptation follows surveillance pressure. Guild halls establish interrogation annexes where members report each other preemptively, earning cooperation credits through betrayal. Public fountains run dry as water supplies divert to questioning chambers where thirst becomes leverage. The Textile Workers Guild converts their assembly hall into confession booths, members alternating as informants and subjects. Static crackles through encrypted Vox channels, black lattice authorization confirmed. The transmission repeats without explanation, suggesting operations beyond regimental authority, while requisition forms appear pre-signed with unusual haste. In the archives, systematic anomalies emerge within witness ledgers. Missing folios cut cleanly with monoknives appear throughout recent records, then rebound with new thread. The gaps follow patterns. 3 pages missing from each major security incident, always testimony sections, always identical cuts. Someone with archival access removes specific evidence while maintaining ledger integrity. Evening settles as Auspex units click through HAB corridors like mechanical insects, counting heartbeats and cataloguing breathing patterns. The surveillance apparatus achieves perfect efficiency. Every civilian monitored, every conversation logged, every suspicion monetized. The economy of suspicion hums at peak throughput, converting rumor into ration upgrades, fear into transport assignments stamped Omega. The question remains, what coordination requires such careful historical revision? Processing begins at Classification Station Alpha, where suspected civilians stand on brass footprints under flickering gaslight. Each receives a numbered slate and measured silence while scribes chant forms. The ledger opens. The person becomes an entry. Threat assessment proceeds through standardized phases. Phase 1 establishes baselines through identity verification, cross-checked against witness ledgers. Phase 2 deploys the tri-question sequence: loyalty, truthfulness, seditious thought, with Auspex units measuring response timing. Hesitation exceeding 2 beats advances subjects to Phase 3, compliance verification. Sleep interruption becomes pulse monitoring. Controlled thirst transforms into austerity conditioning. Stress positions rename themselves static posture maintenance. The catechist's bell, an inductive neural prod, administers doctrinal alignment through targeted electrical stimulation. Previous scars are logged as prior non-compliance indicators. Classification outcomes follow clinical precision. White classifications return to supervised labor with purity testimonials stapled to work papers. Grey subjects enter re-education shifts, featuring doubled quotas and halved rest periods. Amber cases face immobilization pending transport schedule Omega. Red classifications proceed to processing facilities for terminal review. Black subjects never leave the hall. The curator of remains records Ash waits for munitorum accounting purposes. Preemptive pacification eliminates potential threats before manifestation through predictive assessment. Civilians displaying statistical markers. Excessive compliance suggesting rehearsal. Insufficient fear responses indicating unnatural conditioning. Family histories of authority questioning. Receive prophylactic elimination. Prevention costs less than correction. Ledger arithmetic validates this approach. Transport schedule. Omega coordinates removal to orbital processing facilities, where specialized equipment ensures complete evidence elimination. Institutional paranoia validates itself through extracted intelligence. Confessions obtained during compliance verification arrive at scriptorium theta with identical phrasing. I knowingly conspired with unnamed persons in times and places I refuse to disclose. This uniformity becomes proof of disciplined conspiracy networks requiring expanded operations. The system feeds on manufactured evidence, each confession justifying further escalation. Private Holmes notices matching confession syntax after intake duty, pointing to signatures formed by identically trembling hands. Sergeant Corrin closes the ledger, quotes Vigilata Primus. Doubt is a weapon pointed inward. Commissar Volk orders contamination prevention protocols. Holmes receives pharmaceutical therapy until questions cease troubling operational effectiveness. At dusk, orders arrive dissolving operational pretense. Harvest District 7 receives classification as entirely compromised, requiring comprehensive cleansing. 12,000 civilians await processing through expanded Transport Schedule Omega. The authorization parchment bears twin seals, regimental command, and a heavier black clay impression, the spiral of black. Wire set beside an inquisitorial rosette scored with tiny stars denoting off-world authority. Below both seals, a single designation, black lattice. Generators cough to life while carts rattle towards supply depots. The machinery has found scope worthy of itself, coordinated by masters signing orders from beyond planetary authority. Tomorrow, processing extends into streets and stairwells, where every door becomes an intake station. Dawn breaks with artificial light. Floodlights mounted on Chimera hulls paint Harvest District 7 in surgical white, casting blade-sharp shadows across ferrocrete corridors marked with red-line stripes. Servo skulls drift through the illumination like mechanical angels, dispensing ritual incense while data scraping every whispered prayer, every suppressed sob, every breath that might carry seditious intent. A Vox order rolls like thunder, blessing of silence in effect. Non-compliant vocalization equals termination. At 0400 local, the tri-clock system dies. Power cuts sever the mechanical heartbeat that regulated civilian life, trapping 12,000 souls in sweltering darkness, broken only by interrogation floods. Steam pipes hiss like coded transmissions. Ventilation systems cycle with rhythms resembling tactical communications. Auspex units shriek false positives. Heat signatures from cooking fires register as weapon discharges. Moisture condensation triggers chemical sensors calibrated for explosive residue. Children's racing heartbeats read as combat stimulants. The rule of third doors escalates beyond recognition. Systematic house clearing transforms every domicile into a processing station. Squad Corrin advances on Habstack 7 Gamma, while Private Holmes cradles an Auspex clicking against Steam's base hum. Breach the Vesk family holds identification papers like lit candles. Father Vesk mouths answers without air, remembering that sound kills today. A child's fingers move in silent counting games. The scribe notes gesture patterns, consistent with covert timing. Amber becomes red with a brass nib scratch. In Stairwell 7G, disaster catalyzes at 10:18. A schoolboy searching for his sister trips, his chalk pouch bursting in white explosion. Voices surge, then choke. The learned reflex. Someone shouts anyway. Lass muzzles flash through clouded light. 3 troopers drop in friendly fire confusion. An aide calls for Medicaid. Command replies, operational tempo priority. The corridor learns new geometry around the fallen, while chalk keeps falling in thin ghost weather. The blessing of silence descends with theological authority. Mothers smother children's sobs with bloodied hands. Fathers die silently rather than cry warnings. The district achieves perfect quiet through systematic elimination of voice. Commissar Volk marks successful compliance verifications while ash sluice pumps hum with industrial efficiency. Holmes flags pattern anomalies, confessions too alike, signatures too steady for starving hands. Corrin answers with doctrine. Uniformity implies training. Amid coordinated slaughter, anomaly moves through chaos. A data slate passes through military cordons, carried by gloved fingers bearing inquisitorial signet rings. The bearer navigates checkpoints without challenge, accessing restricted zones while combat rages meters away. At 1340, the gloved hands exit the kill box unsearched, signet rings catching floodlight and throwing back rosette stars. No guard unit questions this authority. No commissar demands identification. Statistical success validates operational doctrine. Elimination quotas exceeded by 15% through efficient processing protocols. Speech reduced to 0 across all monitored sectors. Rumor networks severed through comprehensive source elimination. Human cost calculates in ash sluice tonnage. Industrial crematoriums processing 11,847 compliance failures while pumping systems strain under organic overflow. Munitorum accountants log the operation as resource neutral. Ammunition expenditure offset by eliminated ration requirements. By evening, Harvest District 7 stands empty. Floodlights illuminate vacant corridors where families once lived. Servo skulls drift through silence, recording perfect compliance statistics. The operation achieves designated objectives through methods refined across multiple theaters, coordinated by authority extending far beyond regimental command. But questions linger in ash-thick air. Who walked classified intelligence through live cordons during planetary purge? And what broader coordination enables such operations to replicate across distant worlds with chilling precision? Harvest District 7 becomes an empty ledger column that refuses to balance. Production quotas miss by 35% as textile output drops from 12,000 meters daily to 7,800. Agricultural processing halts entirely when specialized workers disappear into ash sluice overflow. The Departamento Munitorum responds with bureaucratic precision. Fines cascade from planetary treasury to regimental budget to municipal bureaus to civilian survivors who now labor for the dead. Colonel Thane receives the invoice as a catechism of extraction. Penalty scripts arrive in stacks. Fuel surcharge for extended searchlights. Munitions replacement for overquota last discharge. Sanitation overrun for ash disposal requiring industrial cleaning protocols. Prefect Hadris distributes these burdens as policy, while crematorium workers develop repetitive stress injuries from constant operation. Hab blocks that lost the most mouths absorb higher work levies. Workshops run double shifts to compensate for eliminated capacity. Funerary rites compress under volume pressure. Ash sluices clog with organic residue, while catechists hum abbreviated ceremonies stripped of words. Safer than speech, faster than full liturgy. The traditional litany of remembrance becomes hummed melody, while maintenance crews retrofit civilian water systems to handle increased particulate loads. Remains are measured by weight, logged as compliance byproduct, and diverted to nutrient reclamation at ratios the Munitorum describes as efficient. Cost-benefit analysis reveals operational metrics with clinical precision. 4 worker lives eliminated per rumor network suppressed. 7 production days lost per security incident prevented. Moderate increase in insurgent chatter as survivors develop adaptive communication methods. Analysts attribute this to displaced communications, recommending further pacification protocols before current operations conclude their assessment phases. Anomalies surface in procurement records. Requisition forms for Operation Black Lattice bear pre-signed authorizations dated 3 weeks before official operational directives. Black wire seals appear on munitions orders, crematorium fuel allocations, and transport scheduling, all stamped before regimental command received authorization. Someone with superior authority planned comprehensive elimination while maintaining the fiction of responsive security measures. Civilian adaptation accelerates under survival pressure. New hush markets trade silence insurance. Brass chits promising protection during vocalization audits, their prices fluctuating with patrol schedules. Children develop gesture languages incorporating traditional counting games with tactical hand signals observed during military operations. Temperature stones evolve into complex prediction networks, mapping interrogation schedules through heat patterns and steam pressure changes. Regimental auditing begins when numbers refuse to reconcile with strategic objectives. Scribe Major Pell leads the review, cross-referencing witness ledger timestamps with power cut logs, Auspex alerts with confession phrasing patterns. If operational success equals civilian stillness, how does command measure actual threat elimination versus manufactured compliance? Silent populations might conceal perfect loyalty or perfect resistance. The metrics cannot distinguish terrorized submission from disciplined conspiracy. The contradiction sharpens with each reviewed document. Operation Black Lattice eliminated 11,847 potential threats while generating zero actionable intelligence about actual insurgent networks. Confessions share identical phrasing, identical handwriting, identical tremor patterns suggesting systematic coaching rather than genuine revelation. Pre-signed requisitions imply coordination extending beyond planetary authority, raising uncomfortable questions about the regiment's actual mission parameters and ultimate command structure. Scribe Major Pell's audit begins with ledgers and ends with heresy. Under flickering lumens in Archive Sanctum Theta, his team reconstructs Black Lattice through paper archaeology, cross-referencing power-cut logs with Auspex alerts, confession timestamps with crematorium fuel consumption. The numbers refuse to reconcile until corruption surfaces like infection through bone. A scribe ring operates within the surveillance apparatus itself. Ledger keepers alter records for brass chits and protein paste. Red classifications become amber for family jewelry. Confession signatures disappear for medical priority. Purity testimonials slip into files already fat with favorable seals. The same scribes feed genuine intelligence upward through channels bypassing regimental command. Couriers in unmarked robes deliver verbatim street reports to Ordo Hereticus handlers whose receipts bear wax impressions never logged in official archives. The data slate carried through Black Lattice cordons contained no insurgent communications. Pell opens it in a sealed chamber, revealing documents titled Population Pacification Study, Scalaran/7. Tables compare speech deprivation intervals to work restitution rates. Graphs map door breach density against rumor recurrence. Margins note confession template efficacy, with identical phrases flagged as optimal for compliance optics. The regiment was harvesting data, not eliminating threats. The reframe crystallizes through bureaucratic evidence. Doctrine's brutality serves experimental methodology coordinated by inquisitorial research divisions. Civilian suffering generates statistical datasets, refining control techniques for export across Imperial worlds. Pre-signed requisitions reveal systematic coordination. Identical black wire authorizations appear on 17 different worlds, each implementing matching operational parameters with careful documentation of variables, urban versus rural populations, industrial versus agricultural economies, optimal terra-to-productivity ratios. Private Holmes receives redacted audit excerpts during supply rotation. He studies missing folios, pre-signed forms, identical confession patterns. In the motor pool, he confronts Sergeant Corrin with evidence spread across a scarred workbench. The confessions were templates, Sarge. We killed for graphs. Corrin examines the papers, then feeds them into a maintenance brazier. Flames consume evidence while he recites Vigilata Primus. Doubt is a weapon pointed outward. Point it inward, and you cut the artery we all drink from. Ash settles on Holmes's boots like grey snow. Commissar Volk responds with institutional reflex. Internal blessing of silence extends to regimental personnel. Military communications require written authorization. Casual conversation faces monitoring. Loyalty verification protocols apply to guardsmen displaying excessive curiosity. The regiment begins surveilling itself with systematic paranoia previously reserved for civilians. Informant chits circulate among squads. Barracks conversations generate suspicion reports. Pharmaceutical therapy increases among troops questioning operational logic. Cross-referenced courier tags reveal the scope. Harvac Primus, Mordian 7, Talon Secundus. Each packet references identical matrices, identical seals, identical trial phases. One annotation reads, Agrarian templates require bell timing suppression. test during sowing. Another notes, Transship Omega complements famine stabilization. The 47th Scalaran represents not aberrant corruption, but refined methodology being tested for Imperial-wide implementation. The audit concludes with uncomfortable recognition. The regiment functions exactly as designed. The corruption lies not in deviation from orders, but in perfect execution of directives whose true purpose remains classified beyond regimental access. The machine consumes its own operators when they threaten operational security through inconvenient awareness. Questions multiply across the data streams. Is this single-world experimentation or empire-wide template? And when systematic suspicion seeds the furrows, how does agricultural production bend under the weight of manufactured fear? Harvac Primus transforms wheat fields into surveillance grids. The litany of 3 questions extends beyond checkpoints into agricultural sacrament. Loyalty oaths at seed time, truth affirmations during growth cycle inspections, sedition denials at harvest way stations. Catechists walk headlands with Auspex wands, while enforcer riders note hesitation beside acreage tallies. Redline protocols carve invisible killing zones ditch to ditch across farmland, marked by rusted posts and fading paint stripes. Informant networks migrate from habstacks to hedgerows, monitoring crop rotation schedules for coded timing. Cousins report cousins for unauthorized planting patterns. Late sowing suggests clandestine coordination. Early harvest indicates insurgent scheduling. Agricultural rhythm becomes evidence of conspiracy. Results manifest through statistical brutality. Yields drop 40% within 2 cycles as workers refuse verbal coordination, fearing overheard instructions might resemble tactical communications. Combine operators work in isolation rather than risk synchronized timing that could appear coordinated for subversive purposes. Black markets emerge trading seed rather than secrets. Heirloom grain varieties commanding higher prices than neighbor intelligence, reversing traditional rural economies. A boy's counting song precipitates escalation. 8-year-old Tam hums traditional harvest rhythms while walking grain paths, his melody mistiming combine convoys by 17 minutes. Spoilage follows as moisture accumulates in delayed loads. The regiment classifies this as agricultural sabotage, implementing enhanced protocols requiring written authorization for any harvest vocalization. Tam disappears into Transport Schedule Omega, while his family receives invoices for damaged grain. Local elders attempt compromise through established channels, petitioning for restored bell timing, bronze chimes that coordinated harvests for 3 millennia. The bells would eliminate dangerous verbal coordination while maintaining agricultural efficiency. Commissariat. Doctrine rejects this proposal, demanding triclock sovereignty over all temporal organization. Traditional rhythms constitute cultural contamination, potentially encoding resistance communications. Spiritual cost manifests in perverted celebration. Feast days become audit sessions, where families present meager yields for inspection, while scribes log enthusiasm levels. Bread tastes of fear and ash, literal ash, from crematorium overflow, contaminating grain stores. Metaphorical ash, from communities consuming their own social bonds. Children learn to associate harvest festivals with disappearances, their songs growing quieter each season until silence replaces celebration entirely. Transport schedule. Omega extends to rural populations with industrial efficiency. Cargo lifters arrive at harvest end, loading agricultural surplus population for orbital resettlement. Requisition forms bear identical pre-signed seals, blackwire authorizations stamped weeks before local incidents justify removals. Fuel allocations, restraint equipment, additional chimes, all authorized in advance across multiple agricultural worlds. The evidence accumulates like grain in silos, identical protocols, identical seals, identical outcomes across urban and rural theaters. Harvac confirms systematic implementation rather than isolated pathology. Agricultural worlds, serving as test subjects for pacification techniques designed for imperial-wide deployment. When verbal communication becomes punishable, What survival languages emerge from desperate necessity? How long before adaptive behaviors are reclassified as insurgent codes requiring further escalation? Friendly fire incidents climb 37% in the 90 days following Black Lattice. The regiment blames environmental confusion, but ledger analysis reveals the true cause. Surveillance doctrine consuming its own operators. Internal surveillance quotas extend to military personnel. Each squad must log 3 comrade irregularities per watch, monitoring peers with the same systematic paranoia once reserved for civilians. Barracks conversations face Auspex monitoring. Shared rations suggest conspiracy. Coordinated rest periods imply seditious coordination. The commissariat formalizes internal consumption through bureaucratic precision. Form 72. Personal requires guardsmen to confess doubts in writing, so uncertainty can be archived and analyzed. Witness ledgers acquire mirror volumes labeled personnel, where soldiers annotate each other until trust dissolves into statistical suspicion. The blessing of silence extends to military communications. Idle maintenance talk becomes prohibited. Unprompted laughter earns classification as morale irregularity. Observer fatigue enters doctrine as diagnosable pathology. Medical code. OF9 prescribes stimulant tablets at reveille, mood dampeners at curfew, and corrective sleep interdiction to reset vigilance parameters. Hands develop identical tremors along firing. Lines. Pupils remain pinned under perpetual illumination. Suicide rates spike until commissariat doctrine reclassifies self-termination as desertion through extreme measures, removing the statistical embarrassment while maintaining pharmaceutical therapy quotas. Sergeant Kale embodies systematic consumption of institutional memory. A 10-year veteran questioning operational efficiency after witnessing civilian massacres, he files polite inquiries about identical confessions and pre-signed requisitions. Loyalty verification procedures follow established protocols. Pharmaceutical analysis revealing insufficient stimulant absorption. Sleep deprivation cycles. Extended exposure to footage of his own men executing civilians. His confession, harboring doubt as weapon against imperial authority, earns rotation to silent posting, a euphemism encoded in Vigilata Primus margins. The escort stops at red line boundaries. Paperwork changes hands. A single report closes his ledger. Contamination vector neutralized. Meanwhile, civilian adaptive communication faces systematic criminalization. Promise knots tied near shrines become textile-based coordination systems. Pebble stacks marking safe water points transform into insurgent directional markers. Children's gesture games, desperate innovations born from survival necessity, receive reclassification as kinetic intelligence protocols. Each adaptation criminalized forces communities deeper into isolation until living resembles quarantine. The moral inversion reaches completion through bureaucratic thoroughness. Hope itself earns classification as subversion because optimism implies expectation of change, suggesting knowledge of planned resistance activities. Unguarded laughter triggers immediate investigation. Shared meals require written authorization. Children playing together constitute evidence of coordinated planning. The index of prescribed behaviors expands daily, while the index of permitted activities contracts toward absolute silence. Perfect cover emerges from perfect terror. Real insurgents, if any exist, now operate within silence indistinguishable from survival fear. Actual conspiracy becomes undetectable amid systematic suspicion of innocent behavior. Pumps fail during nights when Auspex units are diverted to barracks surveillance. Grain silos burn while squads complete mandatory self-reporting forms. The surveillance apparatus achieves total blindness through total vigilance, eliminating genuine threats through noise amplification. Ordo Hereticus Interrogator. Vex announces field evaluation visits, his sealed orders referencing apparatus consumption ratios and operational sustainability metrics. Audit evidence leaks through scribering networks into military rumor channels. Fragments of Scribe Major Pell's findings sold as page 3s, folded into bread rations. Internal purgation protocols activate under codename Glasshouse. Squads, shadow squads, commissar's trade, clipboards for execution pistols. Prefect Hadris requisitions body bags as administrative envelopes. The machine completes its circle, harvesting operators to maintain experimental purity. Veterans remembering pre-doctrine operations face loyalty verification. Guardsmen displaying operational fatigue receive pharmaceutical therapy until memory conformity aligns with current doctrine. The regiment prepares to eliminate its own institutional knowledge, consuming the foundation necessary for military effectiveness. Can a unit survive when trust has been systematically eliminated from command structure? What is the ultimate sustainability of paranoia as operational doctrine when the watchers must watch themselves until no one remains to operate the machinery of observation? The ledger closes on transformation complete. Production capacity damaged beyond recovery. Textile output reduced 40%. Agricultural yields catastrophic. Industrial quotas met through forced overtime that consumes workers faster than transport schedule Omega. Faith perverted into compliance mechanisms where prayer becomes audit session, feast becomes inventory, hope becomes classified subversion. A military unit survives by consuming its own operational capacity until veterans become liability. Initiative becomes insubordination. Institutional memory becomes contamination requiring pharmaceutical correction. The core reframe crystallizes through bureaucratic archaeology. Treating every civilian as a spy eventually makes spies of everyone. If not indeed, then in the habits necessary for survival. Silence becomes conspiracy. Adaptation becomes resistance. Endurance becomes evidence of coordinated planning. The system creates the enemies it claims to eliminate, validating paranoia through the behaviors paranoia generates. Dawn at checkpoint Gamma 7. 3 years after Black Lattice, the queue forms with clockwork precision. A new child approaches. Not Tam, who rode Omega skyward, but his cousin bearing identical features and learned terror. The 3 questions echo through recycled air that tastes of metal and systematic fear. Do you serve the Emperor's will? We serve the Emperor's will. Do you speak only truth? We speak only truth. Do you harbor thoughts against the throne? We harbor no thoughts against the throne. Perfect recitation. The catechist stamps his pass with the black wire seal, still in use, now bearing refined rhetoric. Compliance verified, civic stability maintained. The boy's eyes hold pharmaceutical stillness while his fingers count tri-clock intervals in practiced silence. Survival requires catechism under the 47th Scalarum. Endurance demands procedural precision. Maintain clockwork timing. Arrive 17 minutes before shifts. Depart 19 minutes after dismissal. Count doors and memorize third door rotations to avoid marked domiciles. Track cooperation scores through ledger awareness and brass chit accumulation. Speak only when shrines face away from Auspex arrays. Never trust pre-signed seals indicating predetermined outcomes. Count tri-clock whistles for interrogation scheduling. Hide backup identification from systematic audits. Remember, informant chits are honored once, never twice. The bleak echo completes its circuit. Endurance as catechism, survival as ritual compliance. Children learn mathematics through body counts. Workers measure productivity in disappeared colleagues. Families gather for meals that taste of ash and institutional fear. Their conversations reduce to approved liturgical responses. In distant archive chambers, inquisitorial assessors compile final reports. The Scalaran template receives approval for imperial-wide implementation. Population pacification studies validate systematic paranoia as sustainable governance methodology. Pre-signed requisitions circulate bearing identical black wire seals, ready for deployment across worlds that still remember trust. The reframed thesis echoes through empty corridors. In the Imperium, certainty is rationed, issued through bureaucracy, logged in ledgers, and purchased with lives that will never be counted in the final accounting.